just let them know that the service is offline, and we'll upload it in a few hours and hopefully have something to show people in a few hours. Okay, let's begin. Hag Sameach. Hag Sameach, everyone. Hag Purim. Sameach. This is Purim. Welcome to our Beth Yeshua Purim Festival. Gentlemen.
Just be glad. Yes, let them rejoice with sadness. God has triumphed mightily. Roni, Roni, Batzion, Hadiyu, Israel, Simply Valti, Bekolev, Bad Yerushalayim. Rejoice, rejoice, daughter of Zion, shout aloud, Israel, sing, rejoice with all your heart, O Jerusalem. For the Lord has taken your punishment, destroyed your enemies. King of Israel, Lord of all is he, in the midst of us, he is mighty. Roni, Roni, Batzion, Shadiyu, Israel, Simki Valti, Bekolev, Bad Yerushalayim. Rejoice, rejoice, daughter of Zion, shout aloud, Israel, sing, rejoice with all your heart, O Jerusalem. For the Lord your God in the midst of you, mighty is his name. Rejoicing over you, songs of gladness, singing joyfully, he will save us. Roni, Roni, Batzion, Hadiyu, Israel, Simki Valti, Bekolev, Bad Yerushalayim. Rejoice, rejoice, daughter of Zion, shout aloud, Israel, sing, rejoice with all your heart, O Jerusalem, O Jerusalem, O Jerusalem. Clap your hands, all you peoples, clap your hands unto the Lord. Shout unto God with your voice, a voice of triumph. For the Lord Most High is powerful, he's a great king over all the earth. We shall subdue the peoples under us, the nations under our feet. Great is the Lord and greatly praised in the city of our God. On the mountain he is beautiful, the joy of all the earth. He's the joy of all the earth. Sing ye praises to our God and King, for he is king over all the earth. God reigneth over the heathen from his throne in Zion. The princes of the peoples are gathered, even God's people of Abraham. All the kings of earth belong to God, he is greatly exalted. Great is the Lord and greatly praised in the city of our God. On the mountain he is beautiful, the joy of all the earth. He's the joy of all the earth. Clap your hands, all you peoples, clap your hands unto the Lord. Shout unto God with your voice, a voice of triumph. For the Lord Most High is powerful, he's the great King over all the earth. He shall subdue the peoples under us, the nations under our feet. Great is the Lord and greatly praised in the city of our God. On the mountain he is beautiful, the joy of all the earth. He's the joy of all the earth. Sing ye praises to our God and King, for he is King over all the earth. God reigneth over the heathen from his throne in Zion. The princes of the peoples are gathered, even God's people of Abraham. All the kings of earth belong to God, he is greatly exalted. Great is the Lord and greatly praised in the city of our God. On the mountain he is beautiful, the joy of all the earth. He's the joy of all the earth. He's the joy of all the earth.
Welcome. It's good to be here with you all on this night of feasting and celebration. This is our Purim celebration. Fairly straightforward. We just get together and kind of remember the deliverance of Adonai in a time of great stress and tribulation. Of course, lots of relevance to the modern time because we are in days of great stress and great great deliberation about the future. So we'll talk about that a little bit as we go tonight. But basically what's going to happen tonight is we're going to do the reading of Megillah, which is the tradition, is to read through the entirety of the book of Esther. And the way that we do this is we have a book over here, and we call for volunteers. Men and women can come up and read. And the pages are fairly large print, so if you have any trouble reading, you don't need your reading glasses, hopefully, because the print is large enough. And we've got 17 portions to read, and when we run out of volunteers, then I volunteer you. But then if we run out of that, then I just go ahead and finish it out. Okay, so without further delay, a couple instructions, of course. This is Purim, and since it's a party and we like to make lots of noise and have fun, just a couple of notes. Anytime you hear the word Esther, there's much praise and celebration. So everybody's yay. Very good. And likewise, when you hear the name Mordecai in the text, very good. And when you hear the name Haman, ooh, very good. Okay, I think that covers some of your instructions. The groggers and noisemakers are also for Haman as well, typically. Okay, so sometimes they get conflated with Esther and with Mordecai as well, but we'll try to keep that separate. So the groggers are for, the noisemakers are for Haman. All right, without further delay, let's get started. If I could have the first volunteer up here to begin on page 1. Do I have a volunteer? There we go. And after you finish your portion, just go ahead and turn the page for the next person.
Okay. The banquets of the king. Those events took place in the time of Achashverosh, who ruled over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. It was in those days when King Achashverosh sat on his royal throne in Shushan, the capital, in the 3rd year of his reign, that he gave a banquet for all his officials and courtiers. The army of Persia and Media, the nobles and the provincial officials were in attendance. He displayed the dazzling wealth of his kingdom and his great splendor for a long time, 180 days. At the end of that time, the king gave a 7-day banquet in the courtyard of the royal palace garden for all the people, both great and small, there in Shushan, the capital. There were white cotton curtains and blue hangings fastened to the silver rods with cords of fine linen and purple. The columns were marble. The couches for reclining at the table were of gold and silver on a mosaic flooring of malachite, marble, and mother of pearl and onyx. Drinks were served in gold goblets, with each goblet different from the others. There was a royal wine in abundance, as befits royal bounty. The drinking was not according to any fixed rule, for the king had ordered the stewards to serve each man what he wanted. Also, Vashti, the queen, gave a banquet for the women in the royal house belonging to the king Ahasuerus.
One of the instructions that I forgot to give is on the pronunciation of the Hebrew. If you act like you know exactly how to pronounce it, nobody else in the room knows for sure. So just blitz on through as if you have full confidence in how you pronounce it.
On the seventh day, when the king was in high spirits from the wine, he ordered Mehuman, Biztah, Harvona, Bigtah, Avagta, Zetar, and Karkas, the 7 officers who attended him, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with the royal crown, in order to show the people and the officials her beauty. For she was indeed a good-looking woman. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the order of the king, which he had sent through his officers. This enraged the king. His anger blazed inside him.
As was the king's custom, he consulted sages well-versed in matters of law and justice. With him were Karshna, Shitar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsna, and Memukhan, the 7 vice-regents of Persia and Media, who were part of the king's inner circle and were the most important officials in the kingdom. The king asked the sages, according to the law, what should we do to Queen Vashti, since she didn't obey the order of King Ahasuerus conveyed by the officers? Memukhan presented the king and vice-regent this answer: Vashti the queen has wronged not only the king, but also all the officials and all the peoples in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. Because this act of the queen's will become known to all the women, who will then start showing disrespect towards their own husbands. They will say King Ahasuerus ordered Vashti the queen to be brought before him, but she wouldn't come. Moreover, the noble ladies of Persia and Media, who hears of the queen's conduct, will mention it to all the king's officials, which will bring about no end of disrespect and discord. If it pleases his majesty, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written as one of the laws of the Persians and Medes, which are irrevocable, that Vashti is never again to be admitted into the presence of King Ahasuerus, and that the king give her royal position to someone better than she. When the edict made by the king is proclaimed throughout the length and breadth of the kingdom, then all wives will honor their husbands, whether great or small. This advice pleased the king and the officials, so the king did what Memukhan had suggested. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to each province in its own script, and to each people in their own language, that every man should be master in his own house and speak the language of his own people.
A while later, when King Ahasuerus' anger had subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. The king's servants attended him, saying, a search should be made for young, good-looking virgins. The king should appoint officials in all the provinces of the kingdom to gather all the young, good-looking virgins to the house for the harem in Shushan, the capital. They should be put under the care of Haggai, the king's officer in charge of the women, and he should give them the cosmetics they require. Then
the girl who seems best to the king should become queen instead of Vashti. This proposal pleased the king, so he acted accordingly. There was in Shushan, the capital, a man who was a Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shemel, the son of Kish, a Benjamin. He had been exiled from Jerusalem with the captives exiled from Yehudah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babel, had carried off. He had raised Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, because she had neither father nor mother. The girl was shapely and good-looking after her father's and mother's death. Mordecai had adopted her as his own daughter. So Esther finds favor. When the king's order and decree were proclaimed, and many girls assembled in Shushan, the capital, under the care of Haggai, Esther too was taken into the king's house and put under the care of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. The girl pleased him and won his favor, so that he lost no time in giving her her cosmetics, her portion of special food, and 7 girls from the king's palace to attend her. He also promoted her and the girls attending her to the best place in the harem's quarters. Esther did not disclose her people or family ties because Mordecai had instructed her not to tell anyone. Every day Mordecai would walk around in front of the courtyard of the harem's house in order to know how Esther was doing and what was happening to her.
When the girls would gather on other occasions, Mordecai would sit at the king's gate. Esther had not yet revealed her family ties or her people as Mordecai had ordered her. For Esther continued obeying what Mordecai told her to do, as she had when he was raising her. On one of those occasions, when Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, 2 of the king's officers, Bigthana and Teresh, from the group in charge of the king's officers, from the group in charge of the private entryways, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Ahasuerus. But Mordecai learned about it and told Esther, the queen. Esther reported it to the king, crediting Mordecai. The matter was investigated, found to be true, and both were hanged on a stake. All this was recorded in the daily journal that was kept with the king.
Sometime later, King Ahasuerus began to single out Haman, the son of Hamdatha the Agagi, for advancement. Eventually, he gave him precedence over all his fellow officers. All the king's servants at the king's gate would kneel and bow down before Haman because the king had so ordered. But Mordecai would neither kneel nor bow down to him. The king's servants at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why don't you obey the king's order?" But after they had confronted him a number of times without his paying attention to him, they told Haman, in order to find out whether Mordecai's explanation that he was a Jew would suffice to justify his behavior. Haman was furious when he saw that Mordecai was not kneeling and bowing down to him. However, on learning what people Mordecai belonged to, it seemed to him a waste to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Rather, he decided to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole of Ahasuerus' kingdom.
In the first month, the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of Ahasuerus, they began throwing pur before Haman every day and every month until the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to Ahasuerus, "There is particular people scattered in your kingdom, dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of all other people. Moreover, they don't observe the king's laws. It doesn't benefit their king to tolerate them. If it please the king, I have a decree written for their king to tolerate them. And I will hand over 330 tons of silver to the officials in charge of king's affairs to deposit in the royal treasury." The king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha and Agagi, the enemy of the Jews. The king said to Haman, "The money is given to you and to the people too. Do with this as seems good to you." The king's secretaries were summoned on the 13th day of the first month. They wrote down all Haman's orders to the king's army, commanders and governors in all of the provinces, and to the offices of every people, to each province in its own script, and to each people in their own language. Everything was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by courier to all the royal provinces to destroy, kill, and exterminate all Jews from young to old, including small children and women, on a specific day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to seize their goods as plunder. A copy of the document, to be issued as a decree in every province, was to be publicly proclaimed to all the peoples, so that they would be ready for that day. At the king's order, the runners went out quickly, and the decree that was issued in Shushan, the capital, and the king and Haman sat down for a drink together, but the city of Shushan was thrown into confusion.
When Mordecai learned everything that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out through the city gate. Since no one was allowed to go inside the king's gate wearing sackcloth in every province reached by the king's order and decreed, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, as many lay down on sackcloth and ashes. When the girls and officials attended, Esther came and confronted her. The queen became deeply distressed. She sent clothes for Mordecai to wear instead of sackcloth, but he wouldn't accept them. So Esther summoned Hanak, one of the king's official attendants, her and instructed him to go Mordecai and find out that this was all about and why Atak went out to Mordecai. In the open space in front about and why Atak went out to Mordecai. In the open space in front of the king's gate, Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him and exactly how much silver Haman had promised to put in the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the decree for their destruction issued in Shushan, so that he could show it to Esther, explain it to her, and then instruct her to approach the king instead with him and implore his favor on behalf of her people. And Hatak returned and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hatak and gave him this message for Mordecai. All the king's officials, as well as the people in the royal province, people that if anyone, man or woman, approaches the king in the inner country yard without being summoned, there is just one law: he must be put to death unless the king holds out the gold scepter for him to remain alive. And I haven't been summoned to the king for the past 30 days.
Upon being told what Esther had said, Mordecai asked them to give Esther this answer: "Don't suppose that merely because you happen to be in the royal palace, you will escape any more than the other Jews. For if you fail to speak up now, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from a different direction, but you and your father's family will perish. Who knows whether you didn't come into your royal position precisely for such a time as this?" Esther had them return this answer to Mordecai. "Go assemble all the Jews to be found in Shushan, and have them fast for me, neither eating nor drinking for 3 days, night and day. Also I and the girls attending me will fast the same way. Then I will go in to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Then Mordecai went his way and did everything Esther had ordered him to do. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner courtyard of the king's palace, opposite the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the king's hall, across from the entrance to the hall. When the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the courtyard, she won his favor. So the king extended the gold scepter in his hand toward Esther. Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. "What is it you want, Queen Esther?" The king asked her. "Whatever you request, up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you." "If it is all right with the king," answered Esther, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared for him." The king said, "Bring Haman quickly, so that what Esther has asked for can be done." So the king and Haman came to the banquet Esther had prepared.
Which page are we on? Okay. At the banquet of wine, the king again asked Esther, Whatever your request, you will be granted. Whatever you want, up to half the kingdom, it will be done." Then Esther answered, "My request that I want is this. If I have won the king's favor, if it pleases the king to grant me my request to do what I want, let the king and Haman come to a banquet which I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said." That day Haman went out happy and in good spirits. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, he neither rose nor moved for him. And Haman was infuriated with Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, where he summoned and brought his friends, and Zeresh, his wife. Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and everything connected in how the king had promoted him and given him precedence over the other officials and servants of the king. Indeed, Haman added, Esther, the queen, let nobody into the banquet with the king that she has prepared except myself. And tomorrow, too, I am invited by her, together with the king. Yet none of this does me any good at all, as long as I keep seeing Mordecai, the Jew, remaining seated at the gate. At this, Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends said to him, have a gallows 75 feet high constructed, and in the morning speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on it. Then go in and enjoy yourself with the king at the banquet. Haman liked the idea, so he had a gallows made.
At night, the king couldn't sleep, so he ordered the record of the daily journey brought, and they were read to the king. As was found written that Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers from the group in charge of the private entries, who had conspired to assassinate King Ahasuerus. The king asked What honor or distinction was covered on Mordecai? For this, the king's servants answered, nothing was done for him. The king then answered, who's that in the courtyard? For Haman had come into the courtyard of the king's palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had prepared for him. The king's servants told him that it's Haman standing there in the courtyard. The king said, have him come in. So Haman came in. The king said to him, what should be done for the man that the king wants to honor? Haman thought to himself, whom would the king want to honor more than me? So Haman answered to the king, for a man the king wants to honor, have royal robes brought, which the king himself wears, and the horse. The king himself rides with a royal crown on his head. The robes and the horse should be handed over to one of the king's most respected officials. And they should put the robes on the man the king wants to honor and lead him on horseback through the streets of the city, proclaiming ahead of him, this is what is done for the man whom the king wants to honor. The king says to Haman, hurry and take the robes and the horse as you say, and do this for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Don't leave out anything you mentioned. So Haman took the robes and the horse, dressed Mordecai, and led him riding through the streets of the city, as he was proclaiming ahead of him, this is what is done for the man whom the king wants to honor. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in mourning.
All right. Okay, here we go. After Haman had told, had told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is a Jew, you will not get the better of him. On the contrary, your downfall before him is certain. While they were still talking with him, the king's official came, hurrying to bring Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And the king again said to Esther, at the wine banquet, whatever you request, Queen Esther, you will be granted it. Whatever you want up to half the kingdom, it will be done. Esther, the queen answered, if I have won your favor, king, and if it pleases the king, then what I ask be given me is my own life and the lives of my people. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, killed, exterminated. If we had only been sold as men and women slaves, I would have remained quiet. But since then, our trouble would not have been worth the damage it would have caused the king to alter the situation. King Ashkashbagash asked Esther, the queen, "Who is he? Where is the man who dared to do such a thing?" Esther said, "A ruthless enemy. It is the wicked Haman."
No, I just need help. Mom, I'll help you. I can't do it. I need help. No, I'll help you. Mom, I'll stay with you. I'll stay with you. Haman. Say Haman.
Haman stood aghast, terrified before the king and queen. In a rage, the king got up from the wine banquet and went out to the palace garden. But Haman remained, pleading with Esther, the queen, to spare his life, for he could see that the king had decided to do him in. Haman had just fallen on the couch where Esther was. When the king returned from the palace garden to the wine banquet, he shouted, "Is he even going to rape the queen here in the palace before my very eyes?" The moment these words left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Harvonah, one of the king's attendants, said, "Look, the gallows 75 feet high that Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke only good for the king, is standing at Haman's house." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger subsided. Do I read the page? Is it? I don't.
Haman stood aghast, terrified before the king and queen. In a rage, the king got up from the wine banquet and went out. Oh, I thought it was each page. No, yeah, you're supposed to read the whole page. Okay. That same day, King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Esther, the queen. Also, Mordecai appeared before the king, for Esther had revealed his relationship to her. The king removed his signet ring, which he had taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Then Esther put Mordecai in charge of Haman's house. Again, Esther spoke to the king. She fell at his feet and begged him with tears to put an end to the mischief Haman that Agag had caused by the scheme he had worked out against the Jews. The king extended the gold scepter toward Esther. So Esther got up and stood in front of the king. She said, "If it pleases the king, if I have won his favor, if the matter seems right to the king and I have his approval, then let an order be written succeeding the letters devised by Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agag, which he wrote to destroy the Jews in all the royal provinces. For how can I bear to see the disaster that will overcome my people? How can I endure seeing the extermination of my kinsmen?"
The Jews allowed the death themselves. King Ahasuerus said to Esther, the queen, and Mordecai the Jew, "Listen, I gave Esther the house of Haman, and they hanged him on the gallows because he threatened the lives of the Jews." Okay. "You should issue a decree in the king's name for whatever you want concerning the Jews, and seal it with the king's signet ring, because a decree written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring can't be rescinded by anyone." The king's secretaries were summoned at that time. On the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan, and a decree was written according to everything Mordecai ordered concerning the Jews, to the army commanders, governors, and officials of the provinces from India to the Ethiopia, 127 provinces. To each province, in its script, and to each people in their language, also to the Jews in their script and language. They wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed it with the king's signet ring. They sent the letters by couriers on horseback riding fast, horses used in the king's service, and bread for the royal stock. The letter said that the king had granted the Jews every city the right to assemble and defend their lives, by destroying, killing, and exterminating any forces of any people or province that would attack them, their little ones or their women, or would try to seize their goods as plunder on their designated day in any of the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar.
The time approached for the king's order and decree to be carried out, the day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to overpower them. But as it turned out, the opposite took place. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. Thus, on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the Jews assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to attack anyone who tried to do them harm. And no one was able to withstand them because all the peoples were afraid of them. All the officials of the provinces, the army commanders, the governors, and those occupied with the king's affairs helped the Jews because they were afraid of Mordecai. For Mordecai had become a powerful person in the king's palace, and his fame had spread throughout all the provinces. Mordecai continued to grow increasingly powerful.
The Jews put all their enemies to the sword. There was great slaughter and destruction, as they did whatever they wanted to those who hated them. In Shushan, the capital, the Jews slaughtered 500 men. They put death to 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamdata, the enemy of the Jews, Parishandata, Dalphon, Aspada, Porada, Aldaliah, Aridata, Permashta, Erisai, Eridai, and Vezada, but they did not touch the spoil. The same day, after the king had been told the number of those killed in Shushan, the capital, he said to Esther, the queen, if the Jews have slaughtered 500 men in Shushan, the capital, and 10 sons of Haman, what have they done in the rest of the royal provinces? Now, whatever your request, you will be granted it. Whatever more you want, it will be done. Esther replied. If it pleases the king, let the Jews in Shushan act again tomorrow in accordance with today's decree. Also have Haman's 10 sons hanged in the gallows. The king ordered these things done. A decree was issued in Shushan. They hanged Haman's 10 sons. So the Jews in Shushan assembled also on the 14th day on the month of Adar and killed 300 men in Shushan, but they did not touch the spoil. The other Jews, those in the royal provinces, had assembled, defended their lives, and won rest from their enemies, killing 75,000 of those who hated them, but without touching the spoil, on the 13th day of the month of Adar. So on the 14th day of Adar, they rested and made it a holiday for celebrating and rejoicing. However, the Jews of Shushan assembled on both the 13th and 14th days of Adar. So it was on the 15th day that they rested and made it a holiday for celebrating and rejoicing. This is why the Jews of the villages, those who live in the unwalled towns, make the 14th day of the month of Adar a day for celebrating and rejoicing, a holiday and a time for sending each other portions of food.
Looks like we got a couple pages left. I'll go ahead and finish this out. Mordecai recorded these events, sent letters to all the Jews in the provinces of Achashverosh, both near and far, instructing them to observe the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day every year to commemorate the days on which the Jews obtained rest from their enemies, and the month which for them was turned from sorrow into gladness, from mourning into a holiday. They were to make them days of celebrating and rejoicing, sending portions of food to each other and giving gifts to the poor. So the Jews took it upon themselves to continue what they had already begun to do, and as Mordecai had written to them, because, for the last time, Haman, the son of Hamdata the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had thrown Pur, that is, cast lots, to crush and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he ordered by letters that Haman's wicked scheme, which he had plotted against the Jews, should recoil on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. This is why these days have been called Purim, after the word Pur. Thus, because of everything written in this letter, and what they had seen concerning this matter, and what had come upon them, the Jews resolved and took upon themselves, their descendants and all who might join them, that without fail they would observe these 2 days in accordance with what was written in this letter, and at the appointed time every year, that these days would be remembered and observed throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim would never cease among the Jews, or their memory be lost by their descendants. Then Esther, the queen, the daughter of the Avichail, and Mordecai, the Jew, gave full written authority to confirm a second letter about Purim. He sent copies of it to all the Jews, to all the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Achashverosh, ensuring their peace and security and requiring the observance of these days of Purim at their designated times, as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had established for themselves and their descendants concerning the matters of fasting and lamenting. At Esther's order, these matters of Purim were confirmed and put in writing in this book. The king Achashverosh laid tribute on the land, the coasts and the islands, all the acts of his power and might, along with a full account of the high honor to which the king advanced Mordecai are written in the annals of the kings of Media and Persia. For Mordecai, the Jew, was second only to King Ahasuerus. He was a great man among the Jews, popular with all his many countrymen. He sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of all their descendants. Amen. Indeed. We're going to have, well done, everybody. I think the kids really showed us up this time. They were eager to volunteer, and they did a great job reading, so kudos to all the kids and to everybody who volunteered. We're going to do something now with the kids. Amy, you've got something for us?
The kids are going to sing a Hebrew song, and Chag is a festival. The Purim festival is a big festival to the Jews. Masechot, masks. Rashanim, and songs and dancing. And that's what, it's a little song, and that's what they're saying. All right, guys, come on up to the front. Okay, why don't you stand over here so you can see the
The children are going to go back for some last-minute preparations for their spiel. In the meantime, you get some comments from me, of course. Bye-bye. That's hilarious. All right. There's a phrase that we see this time of year. You see it on greeting cards. You see it on digital messages. For such a time as this. For such a time as this. Sometimes whole concerts are called for such a time as this. And you'll see this in Israel. And they'll put together these grand productions for such a time as this. Meaning, referring, of course, to the moment when Mordecai is saying to Esther that you may have been put in this position, your position of prominence and opportunity and impact, so that you can make a difference. You may have been put in this place for such a time as this. From chapter 4, it says this: if you fail to speak up now, relief and deliverance will come to the Jews from a different direction. But you and your father's family will perish. Who knows whether you didn't come into your royal position precisely for such a time as this? For those of you who had the opportunity to give to relief efforts in the Ukraine situation, you had your prosperity for such a time as this. For those of you who were in a position to influence and make an impact at levels of decision making, you had your opportunity for such a time as this. We see this phrase. But actually it begins with this. What's interesting is this phrase, for such a time as this, and then we begin the book of Esther with this statement about, from the life of Ahasuerus, speaking of his time. These events took place in the time of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus, who ruled over 127 provinces. Remember from the text, this is the one. This is the Ahasuerus. It was in those days that this Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne, it says in the text. Because this was the moment of preparation, because it wasn't just Esther who was prepared, it was Ahasuerus who was also prepared for such a time as this. This is the time In the Torah, we see this phrase, these are the generations, toledot is what you see in the Torah. The times and the peoples of. This was definitely the time of Achashverosh. We think of him as a legend, as the groom of Esther. We think of him as somewhat benign, not so terrible. We think of him as somewhat neutral, but if you read the text, it's not so much a different story. I mean, we boo Haman and we celebrate Mordecai and Esther, but when Achashverosh is mentioned, we don't say anything. But look what happens here in this story. In the narrative, chapter 3, King Achashverosh began to single out Haman for advancement. Haman was indeed singled out to become viceroy, second in command, second in authority. The king so ordered it. He had precedence over all the fellow officers, all the fellow servants. And he had everybody bow down because it was so the king had ordered, it says in the text. If we look at Achashverosh from the chapter 1 perspective of Esther, excuse me, if we look at Achashverosh from chapter 1, he was a weak king. His kingdom was tenuous. Here he is throwing a 6-month party to impress everybody about his rule. He's in the 3rd year of his rule, and his rule is a little precarious at this position. So he has to impress everybody. So he has this 6-month-long party, and then he has the party of parties for 7 days. He needed his wife to come in and prop up his image, and he called for Queen Vashti, and what did she do? She sucker punched him. She betrayed him. She made him look bad. It's very bad. This is in the 3rd year of his rule. What is a king going through in the 3rd year of his rule? He's either hit his stride or things are a little precarious. All right. So I'm not sure about this King Achashverosh. He seems to be a little bit neutral. If anything, he seems to be a little hostile. And then we have this. The king's secretaries, chapter 3, the king's secretaries were summoned on the 13th day of the 1st month to write down all of Haman's orders regarding the Jews. The king's armies and commanders and provinces and officials and every people, each to his own province, in his own language, in his own script, everything written in the name of King Achashverosh and sealed to the king's signet ring. The letters were sent by courier to all the royal provinces. And this is the line, quote, to destroy, kill, and exterminate all Jews from young to old, including small children and women, on a specific day. It says a copy of this document was issued. And then it says this, then the king and Haman sat down for a drink together, like 2 gentlemen in a business deal, having a drink together. But the city of Shushan was thrown into confusion. And think about what's happening here. Sometimes we read over the text and we just zip right over the top of it without realizing, wait a minute, what was just said? All the Jews, young and old, including children and women, are going to be killed, destroyed, killed, exterminated. This is a masterstroke. This is a genocide moment. And just to kind of set the stage a little bit, Haman is clever about this. So what does he say? Does he say, okay, tomorrow is open season on the Jews? Would that have been effective? It probably would have been effective. But he doesn't say tomorrow is open season on the Jews. What does he say? They were summoned on the 13th day of the 1st month to write this decree. This is in chapter 3 of Esther. And that they were going to kill on a specific day, listen to this, the 13th day of the 12th month. It was 12 months in the future. 12 months, what did they need 12 months for? For staging. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. Let's get our things in place. Let's get our people in place. Let's get our machine organized. Because to exterminate all the Jews isn't something you do in a day unless you're prepared to do it, unless you're going to get organized. Do you see what's happening here? The Nazi war machine was very organized, and the Holocaust that was perpetrated by the Nazi war machine was likewise very organized. In almost an unhuman way, they were, to read the discussions, to read sort of the journalistic reports that came out from the Holocaust. It was very organized, it was very methodical. And that's what you're seeing here. But what is the effect? Imagine, if you will, the effect of knowing that on a certain day, it's going to be open season on all the Jews. On a given day. We're going to publish this day, and it's 12 months in advance. Imagine the horror. Imagine the tension, the anxiety. You announce a decree to exterminate everyone. And the city of Shushan, it's thrown into this confusion. Why is it thrown into confusion? Because the truth of the matter is, at this point, the Jews have reached a level of saturation, and probably some assimilation, in Persia. We saw this in Eastern Europe, in Germany and elsewhere, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, especially in Germany. The Jews had reached a level of impact and influence in society. The secular Jews were somewhat successful at assimilating into Germanic society and Germanic culture. And we have this moment when the city is thrown into confusion, probably because of the level of saturation. But let me approach this from a different angle. The Jews were to be the light to the nations, the light of Adonai to the nations. The Torah was to be their sort of what you might call an instruction manual about how to interact with Adonai to all the nations. And so when the Jews get exiled into Persia, it wasn't like in Babylon where they became, it wasn't like in Egypt where they became slaves. I'm guessing that they became part of culture and part of society. I'm guessing the reason that Shushan was thrown into confusion is because, and we have writings that indicate this, that the Jews had become somewhat integral to the culture of Persia. We see that Mordecai has a position of prominence in the gate of the king, and so on and so forth. So this is what you have that's happening. A couple other thoughts real quickly if I can. Notice that nothing was done to acknowledge Mordecai when he saved the life of the king. It was only later when Haman thought he was going to be honored of the king did Mordecai end up wearing the robes of the king. Mordecai was passed over for any honor for having saved the life of the king. And it isn't until the king is, in a sense, using this episode in order to trap Haman and get a sense of Haman's true motives. And when he does that, he has Mordecai honored as a way of knocking Haman down to size a little bit. And so we have this. Mordecai left the king's presence arrayed in royal blue and white, wearing a large gold crown and a robe of linen and fine purple. And everyone shouted for joy. So we have twice where Mordecai is honored. The first time he's honored is in place of Haman, and the second time that he's honored for the prominence of having overcome Haman and for strategizing to prepare the Jews for this attack. The surreal part of this whole thing, though, is that this sort of decree to have the Jews exterminated on a given day was never rescinded. And that's the perplexity of this. In one sense, you might think that, okay, the Jews are allowed to defend themselves, but there's something odd here in that the decree to exterminate the Jews, the permission slip to attack the Jews was never rescinded. It was never reversed. Rather, they are left without a defender other than themselves. So, what does that make us think of? Again, the challenge with a book like Esther is to make it relevant and to connect it to the modern times. And of course, with all the tension in our modern times, with all the focus, with all the preparations about what's happening in these days, whether these are the end of days or not, certainly your mind can go there. But let me offer you this. the enemy, the Hasatan, is preparing to unleash his emissaries upon Israel in the last days. That permission will not be rescinded. There is no revival that will rescind that permission. There is no praying and intercession by the kingdom of God that will reverse the permission slip that the enemy will have on a given day in the future, wherein the enemies will attack Israel. That's actually coming. We know it's coming. In the same way that the Jews had 12 months to think on a given day they will be attacked, likewise, the world has a number of months, unknown at this time, the world has a number of months to consider that the enemies of God will attack Israel and Jerusalem. And Shushan was thrown into confusion. So here we are. Likewise, when it says that the Jews were allowed to defend themselves, that no one was coming to their aid, that no one was coming to their defense, it strikes me as odd that Ahasuerus couldn't have perhaps dispatched some armies to protect the Jews. That would have worked, I think. Certainly a show of force might have worked. No, there was no one that was dispatched. Again, at the end of days, there is not a nation on earth that will defend Israel. It is only Adonai Tzvaot, the Lord of hosts, who will defend Israel. So at the end of chapter 10, we have this. Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus. He was a great man among the Jews, popular with all of his many countrymen. He sought the good of his people and interceded for the welfare of all their descendants. And I talked about this a little bit on Shabbat, this idea that you have the preparation of the you have the end of the book here. And the presentation of Mordecai as this very significant character in the court, and that he was a great man, second only to the king. Remember that this is in the context of exile. They went first to Babylon. The Jews, the people of the southern kingdom, went first to Babylon and then to Persia, and they went to Babylon after the destruction of the temple and the destruction of Jerusalem rather. And so everything there now in the span of history, in the timeline of history, is looking forward to the return of Israel. That's what the prophets prophesied about, or the prophets prophesied about, and so on. So we have this, and I want to draw your attention to Nehemiah chapter 1. This is the month of Kislev, the 20th year. I was in Shushan, the capital. It's the same city. And they talked about Jerusalem, and they said the remnant of the exile left there in the province are in great distress, held in contempt. The wall of Jerusalem is in ruins, and its gates have been completely burned up. This is after we read in the book of Esther that people were dispatched to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple and to rebuild the city wall. So in Nehemiah chapter 2, we have this. Nehemiah is the cupbearer to the king, and it happened that he was to bring the king wine, and he brought it to the king. Prior to then, I had never appeared sad in his presence. The king asked, "Why do you look so sad? You're not sick." So this must be some deep inner grief. At this, I became very fearful. I said, "May the king live forever. Why shouldn't I look sad when the city, place where my ancestors' tombs are, lies in ruins? Its gates are completely burned up." And the king said, "What is it you want?" And Nehemiah responded to him, "If it pleases the king, if your servant has won your favor, send me to Yehuda, to Judah, to Jerusalem, to the city of my ancestors' tomb, so that I can rebuild it." Verse 6, with the queen sitting next to him, the king responds. And it's an interesting line, with the queen sitting next to him. If you look at the timeline of Nehemiah, the timeline of the exile in Persia, and the timeline of Esther, you end up with this overlap, such that the queen sitting next to the king, which in the language, the literary understanding of it, that may not have been king and queen, husband and wife. It could have been king and previous queen, because Esther would almost certainly have outlived her husband Ahasuerus, and she would have remained influential in the court because she was a woman of such great power and notoriety and wealth. So she would have been prominent in that court, and so it's very likely that she would have continued her position as queen. And all of a sudden we've got this one-liner here. Why does it say the queen was sitting next to him? And I submit to you that the queen, Esther, had a role in Nehemiah's permission to go back to rebuild the walls of Israel. This is the victory, the return of the Jews to the land and the coming of Yeshua to Jerusalem. In 521 BC, they began the rebuilding of the temple, and they completed the rebuilding in the temple 4 years and 3 months later. This temple was much more simple. It was half the size of the temple that was built by Solomon. It was much less lavish. It wasn't as decorated and wasn't as beautiful, quite frankly. Over the next 400 years, though, a series of Gentile rulers alternatingly built up and defiled the second temple. It's almost like we had a roller coaster of the temple there. And this culminated in 39 BC, in which King Herod took control of the temple. And when he did that, he proposed to renovate the temple in actually 20 BC. So no less than, say, 25 to 50 years before the time of Yeshua, Herod takes control of the temple and begins to renovate it. Remember the line in the Gospels when they said, look at these stones, look at the temple. That was the work of Herod. Despite the Jews' fears that he meant to tear it down, the main work on the temple was completed in a year and a half, and so forth. This was the temple that Yeshua came to. And this was Israel, the destination of Yeshua. And so what I submit to you is all this is working together. This narrative of Esther is kind of the preparation for Israel to return. What do we see in the world today? What is our modern sort of landscape? We've got Russia, Ukraine, China, Iran, UK, EU, the UN, NAFTA, WTO, WHO, all these international organizations, all these international power structures. Everybody jockeying for power and control. But what do we know? What do we absolutely know? That Yeshua is coming back to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is this stumbling stone. Let me finish with this quickly. From Zechariah 12, a prophecy, the word of Adonai concerning Israel. Here is a message from Adonai, who stretched out the heavens and laid the foundation of the earth and formed the spirit inside human beings. What is he talking about there? He stretched out the heavens, that is the heavens, the universe, and he lays the foundation of the earth and forms the spirit inside human beings. The foundation of the earth being a pointer, if you will, referring to the foundation stones of the temple and the rock upon which the temple is built. And he says this, I will make Yerushalayim, that is Jerusalem, a cup that will stagger the surrounding peoples. Make no mistake, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of animosity and a lot of tension around the world, but Jerusalem is the cup of trembling. Jerusalem is the stumbling stone. Jerusalem is the prize or the offense that everybody is concerned about. I will make Jerusalem a cup that will stagger the surrounding peoples. Even Yehuda will be caught up in the siege against Jerusalem. When that day comes, I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who try to lift it will hurt themselves, and all the nations, earth's nations, will be massed against her. Make no mistake, Iran is concerned and consumed with Israel and especially Jerusalem. There's no question about this. And that weighs heavily into the modern affairs and what is happening in the world. Many people don't realize it, but there was actually activity between Israel and Iran, and Iran sort of declared that it's open season. Typically what Iran does is work through proxies, work through terrorist organizations in order to attack Israel. But what came out of this, what happened was Israel wiped out hundreds of drones. And in response to this, Iran declared open season. And these drones belong to the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which is kind of the organization that is behind a lot of the terrorist activity in and around Israel. And so Israel's attack on these drones was effective, and as a result, Iran decided to take the gloves off and proclaim open season against Israel directly. So make no mistake, that's part of this conflagration with Ukraine as well. It's all kind of tied together. So what do we know? What do we learn from the book of Esther? What do we learn from history? What do we learn from this? We learn, first of all, to celebrate the victory of Adonai and to anticipate the victory of Adonai. Adonai has been faithful to redeem and to deliver Israel at every turn. That has never failed, and Adonai will be faithful until the very end. There is a trajectory, there is a timeline of human history that has an absolute course. We've read the book, we know how it ends. The only thing we don't have is the day-to-day timing. But we know it's a certain day. So we can look forward to that. In fact, this is the perplexity for me as I look at the text and I say, wow, they had 12 months to wait. And they knew that on a certain day they were going to be attacked. Guess what the enemy knows? The enemy knows he has a certain day. He knows the trajectory. He knows the timeline. Now, if you're the Satan, if you're Hasatan, and you know you've got a day, but you're going to try anyway, are you going to do your best to make life miserable for the people of God? Absolutely. There's no pulling punches here. The enemy has all of his resources towards the conclusion and the establishment of his plan. And yes, for whatever reason, we are in the crosshairs. We are in the crossroads. When Yeshua said to Kepha, the enemy has requested to sift you like wheat, I think no less the enemy is sifting all of us like wheat, and will continue to do so, and that the temperature is going to get heated up. So be of good cheer. Amen. Be encouraged. Hallelujah. Baruch Hashem. Because we know the end of the book. All right? And Adonai's graciousness and his healing is complete, and we will be victorious because he is victorious. It is his victory. Hallelujah. All right, with that great, profound, exciting message of encouragement, let me bring back the kids to lift your spirits a little bit. Hag Sameach, everybody. Hag Purim Sameach. Can somebody go get Rebitz Casey and have her bring out her people?
Okay, so we are going to do the spiel. We're going to act out the book of Esther, and we've got all ages tonight. It goes from Shabbat school age kids to the teens and some moms. Beth Yeshua players, I present to you.
Right, chairs and tables.
That.
Quick. Oh, I know it works. Savannah. Where's Savannah?
What a feast, O King.
Yes. How about some entertainment, guys? Go get Queen Vashti. My queen. The queen refuses to obey your orders. Oh, what should I do?
If all the women in Persia hear that the queen has disobeyed your orders, they in turn will disobey their husbands, and the result will be chaos. The king must banish her.
Guards, back! What a wife!
Chairs, I need all.
What a wife! What a Where do I put this? Oh, I'll put it.
Nope.
We need this.
All right. I need the, okay, so you guys can just come on out. Yep, there's no around. Zach.
Oh, ladies. The king has banished the former queen. The king now wants a new queen. All young women will have a chance of being queen of all Persia if they come to the castle for a beauty contest. The winner will be crowned queen.
Go, God may work through you to do great things if you're a queen. But don't tell anyone that you're a Jew.
Yes.
All right. King, I need the king. Here. Okay.
Bring in all the girls. Come on, girls.
Or like all the...
Why did you have your foot? I choose you.
King, hold up. Hey. You can take a script. Take a script. Victoria and Tara. Mordecai.
Let's assassinate the king. Why? So that we can be kings. Good idea.
Okay, I need the king, advisor, okay, and I need chairs. Wait. Oh no, I don't need chairs. I just need the king, advisor, guard. And Mordecai can suck. Okay? King, advisor, guard.
He said to get for it.
No. Okay, king, advisor, guards, and Mordecai suck. Okay, ready.
See who that is.
Tonight, high below in the king's bedroom, the guards, Victoria and Teresh, are planning to assassinate the king. So be ready.
Yes, ma'am.
I need chairs.
Make them like royal. You always call your mom. No, put them like.
You're sitting there.
Thank you. You're welcome, ma'am.
It's on and Terry. Off the side.
Now, Parrish, be quiet. Okay.
You're lying. Stand up. Hey, chairs go away. Chairs go away.
Write that in history book.
It's okay. Chairs go away. And Mordecai, guard. You're off to the side. And Haman. Where's Haman?
We're off to the side. Let's go. Make way for Lord Haman.
Dog, why don't you bow?
I only bow to God.
What kind of man is this?
He's a Jew. You stop. Does he stop?
All right, I need advisor, king, and Haman. You guys are back sitting. Just sit down.
Oh, great king.
Yeah.
There's a certain man among your kingdom who are very, very evil. All right? Not me. But, all right? If I have your permission, I want to kill them all in the month of Adar.
Whatever, here's my ring.
Thank you. Oh, great. I came.
Okay. All right, Esther. Okay, Esther. I need Esther. Guards. And Mordecai's his son. Okay, guards.
I need to speak to Esther. Haman wants to kill all the Jews.
What?
Go to the king and tell him that you're a Jew and maybe he'll renounce it. Well, I'll get all the Jews to pray for him.
All right, I need the king. Guards, sit down.
Sit down.
Sit down. Haman and Esther. Yep, you ready?
Wait,
Not yet.
who is this? Oh, great king, I have something to tell you. I would like to invite you and Haman to a feast that I have. Come on, prepare to go. We'll be there soon.
Table and chair.
so that you will come to another feast tomorrow. But then on the floor. Great, Mom and I will be there. Great. Great.
Take it all away.
Are we done?
All right, we came in off to the side. All right. Over there with the Mordecai and guards. Over here. Everybody stand up.
Bow.
No.
Let me look at this paper that I wrote myself. Okay. The Queen invited me and the King to a banquet. She thinks I am as important as the King.
Oh, really?
Okay. Haven and Haven's fight. Haven, you're back.
There you go again, crying. What is the matter? You lost. You lost. You forgot my pasta sauce.
Okay, so even though I am in second in command, and even the Queen thinks so, Mordecai still will not bow to me. What should I do?
Am I the only one who has to think here? I have an idea. Have our servants make a guide. Then ask him permission to handle Mordecai, and there your problem is solved.
Oh, that would be good. But how high should it be?
Am I the only one? What do you think? Put your friend to work. He's very tall.
So I was thinking, let's go a bit extra and go 75 feet, just in case.
That's good. Now go get me my pasta sauce, or I kick you out of the house.
Cheers. Oh, nice. That's a good chair.
I got it. Like a bag. Okay. Wait, this one is for the advisor.
Wow.
Just don't.
I can't sleep. Read me some of my history. It's pretty dry. And it will help me sleep.
Yes, Your Majesty. Then King Ahasuerus led out his army against the Greeks. He decided to make a bridge out of boats across the Hellespont.
No, not that. I want some heavy history.
Then the guards, Bigdana and Teresh, conspired to kill the king, but Mordecai saved the king's life.
What was he rewarded with? Oh, that's sad.
There goes my sleep.
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care.
It's Lord Haman.
I don't care about him.
Should I bring him in?
No.
King, I would like to ask you something very important to moi.
First,
Go do that tomorrow.
First, I would like to.
First, I would like you to tell me what should I do for someone so special. Please. Basically, that's what I
think I know means. Okay, here's the thought. Put the special one on a horse that is yours, that's very special. Then put your clothes on him and have someone not super important parade him around the town.
Oh yeah, do that to Mordecai. Yeah, get out.
Mamma mia, Peppo, trovi? What is the matter now? It's not the pasta sauce. You're holding your foolish paper.
He ate the pasta sauce.
I use these for important speeches and stuff.
I see. Tell me, what's the matter?
Well, the king told me to parade Mordecai around town and show off how cool he is and stuff.
Or are you sure it's the other way around? Are you trying to play with me?
No.
Play with your wife.
Well, at least the gallows are coming online nicely. You should be happy.
Okay, I'll be happy then.
Yeah. Okay.
More chairs and table. Chairs and table.
Thank you. Give me my seat.
Okay, I need exactly.
Guards.
Guards.
Wow.
And I need the guards.
We're here. Why do I have bad things? I need good servants, not bad. Well, this is great food. What is your real request? I am a Jew, and Haman, the evil person who is trying to kill the Jews and me. So please go! Get out of this kingdom! Is it true, really?
So, you see, there is, what good news? There's no such thing as good news in this magical...
Really, we need to say the gallows are done.
There's no such thing
Gallows?
as gallows.
What?
No
Gallows?
gallows.
You know, the
Impossible
ones
gallows.
that were, meant to kill
No gallows.
Mordecai?
No
What?
gallows.
Hey, Mordecai! You didn't know that? Sheesh, I didn't know he was gonna do that.
I kind of just gonna put
Wow.
things down now. This is not helpful anymore.
Hey, come on! Stand!
For this, I need
Now get out of my kingdom! Wow, why do I have bad empires? Hey, you got your hat.
You could stand up.
Well done, Mordecai. I have to give you all that Haman has. Is there anything more we can do to save the Jews instead of Haman? Like just the Jews, like Jews in this whole kingdom? No, the Greeks, the Medes, and the Persians have been really sealed. Thank you. Haman, this fall off the roof. It's okay.
And the Jews are delivered from their sins.
We won. Let's eat the end.
So concludes our Beth Yeshua players for 2022. I think there's an Emmy, or is it an Oscar? Emmy, Oscar, something. The best use of an Italian accent in a Middle Eastern character. And the melodrama of Haman. That's perfect. We're going to eat in a few minutes, so in preparation, in memory of Yeshua, Ki nefesh habasar ba'adami, the life of the flesh is in the blood, Ki adam lu benafesh bechapar, it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, borei peri hagafen, amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth the fruit of the vine, amen. In remembrance of Yeshua, the bread of heaven, the true bread of life, coming down, our daily bread. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamotzi lechem min ha'aretz, amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth, amen. In the pattern of the Jewish holidays, they tried to kill us. Adonai delivered us. Let's eat. Hag Purim Sameach, everybody, and Hag Sameach. Shalom.